I'm just gonna start off by washing this front bumper before I start doing any repairs to it first. Just a little bit of soap and water, and then I'm just gonna wash it off and let it dry. It's just gonna give me a nice clean surface to work with, and I can also assess all the damages on this and see what I really do have. I'm going to start by breaking down this front bumper. I'm going to remove all the pieces that I can, starting with the fans right here, the fan shrouds that move up and down. I'm going to go ahead and take these off. It's just two 8mm bolts, one on each side. And then I can also start by removing these cover pieces in the front for kind of like the fog light housing spots. These are just these clips that they push down, and then you can push that out, and you got to go all the way around and remove every single one of them before these will be able to pop out through the front. So I have both of these bolts out of both sides, and then there's also these little clips on the top that will catch. So you just want to get underneath these, pull up, and then pull back, and this will be able to come off once those pop loose. Also, looks like there's going to be two of these bolts on the bottom side. They're going to have to take off two as well that holds in that shroud in order to pop that out.
This is one thing.
Onto the grill, which you remove from the back side. It's going to be a bunch of these. Again, there's a bunch of clips. This needs to pull out, and then this will come forward. And same thing at the top here. These looks like they pull up, and then you can pull this forward, and you got to go all the way around and do this to every single one of these. Top right bumper, same thing, has all these tabs right here. Mine's a little bit broken in quite a few of these spots, so it's more so just breaking off. But I'm gonna get this grill part off first, and then I'll work on getting this actual black front piece for the crosshair bumper off. I was able to get this front black grill piece off. Last thing we have is the crosshair with this little mesh piece here. These are the 10mm bolts that would screw into the sides right here. This side is obviously snapped off from that. However, this side is not. So I'm gonna go ahead and remove these now that we have access to them because this front other piece is off. So I'll just take the two 10mm out, and then that should allow us to be able to remove this whole entire piece then. And then our bumper will be completely disassembled. I'm gonna start working on all these cracks that we have. I do have a couple spots with cracks in them. First thing I'm gonna do is find right where each crack ends. Looks like this one ends right about in here. And I'm going to take a drill bit, put it on the very end of where it is, and drill it out. And this is so that crack does not get any bigger than what it is. This will stop the crack from growing. So I'm gonna find each crack and go ahead and drill a hole. This one will be right down here, right at the very end, and that will be able to stop it. I have a couple more cracks over here, so I'll have to drill right here on the edge, right about here on that edge, and then on the underside. So I could also kind of wanted to start, so I'm just going to be safe and probably drill it right around here. Next step, once you have these holes drilled out on the end of the cracks, what we're going to be doing is drilling out holes onto each side of this crack where it is. And we're going to be feeding zip ties through and basically cinching this together. So this will push the crack together and allow us to get a nice evener surface. Make sure that this is oriented where you want it, where this naturally falls together. So I have my first two drilled out right here. As you can see, I'm kind of holding this with my finger to where this crack naturally goes back together. I'm going to hold this in place where this seats the most flush that it can be before I go ahead. I'm going to take a zip tie, feed this through on the back side, and I'll show you what that looks like. First zip tie is on. I'm just going to tighten it down, cinch it on the back side. So as we can see for this crack on the top here, this is actually a clip that seats right underneath the driver's side headlight. I'm not going to be able to zip tie this because this is going to make this too thick, and I have my last zip tie as close up to this top as I feel comfortable putting it. Once I cinch this down, this will hopefully and ideally bring this together a little bit. But what I'm going to do to make sure that this is a little bit more secure and stronger is take a little bit of some of this JB Weld plastic bonder and place it in between this crack right here and also right in here, so that way when I cinch this down, this will bring this together, and hopefully this will take care of this clip enough to where this will hold when I do put this front bumper on. And I'm also going to put a little bit of that JB bond too as well. Right in between here, this is the top part is where I'm going to put this on, and then the rest of this I will keep normal down here all the way. In order to get the seam here seated how we want it to, it won't align up whenever I try to pull this over. There's just too much of a catch here, and it's all catching from right down here. You can see that one side is significantly lower than the other side, and it needs to get pulled over. I'll see if you can see it on the back side here. One side is definitely a lot higher than that other side. So what I'm going to do is take a heat gun right in that area where it's pinched, and I'm just going to go ahead, heat this area up, and it should allow me to move around these a little bit more so I can get this seated how I want it to and make this seam as even as possible. After just a little bit of heat, I was able to get these ends even, and now this whole seam should be made up nicely. All of these zip ties are on here that I need now. I'm just waiting to tighten up these last two because I'm going to add my little bit of JB weld right here in between these two cracks on the top. So for starting that process, I just have a towel. I'm going to dip it in some acetone, and then I'll go ahead and wipe it on this in between these cracks here as best as I can, and then I can go ahead and make my JB weld, add it into here, and then I'll cinch up these last two clips right here and make sure that these are going to be able to hold. While I had this epoxy out and I was using it, so I covered up this spot right here with that tab that was broken in the two spots. I just put some tape over it to kind of secure everything in while it currently dries. And there was a couple other spots too that I used. There's a broken tab up here that I went ahead and used it on. Same thing, covered it with tape. Tape is just to kind of secure it in and tighten it to hold it in place. And then I also had this inside fender liner piece that sticks out here. This was broken off on the bottom half. So I went ahead, threw some of the epoxy on this too as well, taped it. And I also have some of these pinch clamps right here to squeeze it on and make sure that it gets a nice firm tight seal. So hopefully this will be able to hold. It's been a couple minutes now, and I'm gonna go ahead and remove all this tape from these, and we'll see what we got here, see if it held up or not. Just be careful removing it. I want to break it apart. Seems to be doing pretty decent. This epoxy resin doesn't actually stick to this tape, fortunately, which makes it a lot easier to pull off. Go ahead and take this side off here too. Yeah, it seems much better. This is actually holding up pretty decent. I'm putting a little bit of tension on this and pushing down, and it does seem to be holding quite well, so I'm pretty happy with that. I'm gonna go ahead and clip off all these excess zip ties from the back side now. Down to the last crack down here that I need to repair. Gonna thread these zip ties back through. Same process as I did on the other side. I'm getting to the back side of the bumper now where these actual stitches are, and I'm gonna be making my repair on the back side for both of my areas today. One of the things you wanna do to get this prepped up is take some 80 grit or even like a 60 grit sandpaper. This is something that will work, and you're just gonna wanna sand right all along the sides of these zip ties, because this is where your actual epoxy and your fiberglass is gonna be laid down, is on these surrounding areas. So you're just gonna wanna get in here with the heavy grit sandpaper and just work it a little bit to rough up and key this surface. Once you get this sanded all up nicely, you do wanna make sure that you get actually in between these as well. So you can just take your sandpaper like this, bend it, and just go like this in between these grooves. Make sure you get in between all of these, because that resin and fiberglass is gonna be laying and overlapping these. I'm just gonna go ahead, take a little bit of acetone and use a towel and wipe these surfaces down to give us something clean to work on. I'm just gonna go over this epoxy kit really quick with you. So this is the fiberglass repair kit from Bondo. You're gonna get 3 main things in here. You're gonna get your actual fiberglass matting, you're gonna get the hardener, and then you're gonna get the epoxy for the hardener. So you will mix this and this when you're ready to use it, and you're gonna apply this to this and lay this down on the crack or the damage or whatever you're repairing. And ideally, this will dry, and when it dries, it hardens and it strengthens the material. So what I'm gonna do first is I'm gonna take this, size this up, and get these pieces cut to the size that I want so that I can place them on these cracks in here. So I have a couple pieces cut out now. I have 2 pieces for this section over here, one for this main big piece, and then another one for this smaller crack over here. And as you can see, when I put this on, it overlaps quite a bit. So I get about 1.5 or 2 inches on each side once I lay this on here, which is what you want. You want that overlap. Same thing with the other side. I got 2 smaller pieces over here. So I'm gonna go ahead and mix this epoxy up and I'll be able to lay this on there. I'm also masking off the front side where these seams are gonna be at. I'm just gonna put some tape over it, and that's just so the epoxy doesn't actually drip through. It's gonna contain everything in here. For mixing this is gonna be 1 ounce. So I have a scale, I'm gonna weigh this out here. For every 1 ounce, you're gonna use 10 drops of this hardener. So I'm gonna weigh out a couple ounces that I think is gonna be enough to do this job, and then I'll adjust accordingly with the number of drops in here. So I did 3 ounces of this hardener, and then I also just did, per that 3 ounces, we did 30 drops of this. I'm just gonna go ahead and take stir stick. I happen to just have a random stick. Go ahead and mix this up, and then we can start applying this to the bumper. I'm just gonna be brushing this on with the little, I have the cup, and then this is just a little foam brush. So I'm just gonna start by dabbing this in here, putting this on the crack, kind of coating it and getting all the areas that I need. Once you have a nice thin layer down, we'll go ahead, take our sheet of fiberglass here, lay this on, and once this gets a little bit wet, it will start to stick. It's just gonna take a little bit of manipulating and having this epoxy resin actually kind of bite into it before it does start to set. Start adding some more of this because we'll have to do, this will help it loosen up and lay down. This is what the material is going to look like after you've added that epoxy to it. You're going to see there's still some bubbles, and that's where those zip ties are. That's okay. You're not going to be able to necessarily get all these pushed down. As long as the fiberglass is actually just over this and covering it, it will protect this and also strengthen the back. This takes approximately 2 hours or so to cure. I'm just going to give it overnight, and I'm going to wait on it. Here's that other side too. Here's what that looks like. So it looks kind of messy right now, but it's the back side of the bumper, so it doesn't need to be perfect.